Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the first webinar of APA Division 52, Human Rights, Peace, and Global Wellbeing Group. I am Dr. Mariam Nasir Tafrishi, the co-chair of the Special Interest Group and an international psychologist by education. Our group has been shaped by the collaboration of a diverse group of psychology professionals who live in different parts of the world. Our mission is to promote human rights, peace, enlightened globalization, and well-being through networking with respect for diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice under this division. Today, we have a special speaker, Dr. Donald Moss, who will be presenting on a well-needed and unique topic, which can help us to have a great start to the new year. The name of this topic is Wellbeing in Times of Global Chaos, Promoting Peace Within and Compassion Without. Dr. Donald Moss is a professor and dean of the College of Integrative Medicine and Health Sciences at Saybrook University, Pasadena, California. He is a clinical health psychologist certified in hypnosis and biofeedback. He is the education chair, publication chair, and president-elect for the Society for Clinical and Experimental Hypnosis and the external relations chair for APA Division 30 and the ethics chair for the Biofeedback Certification International Alliance. He previously served as the president of SCES, president of Division 30, and president of the Association for Applied Psychophysiology and Biofeedback. Moss is co-editor of 3 books named Integrating Psychotherapy and Psychophysiology, Your Pathway Through Chronic Illness, and Handbook of Mind-Body Medicine for Primary Care. He is also co-author of 3 books named A Primer of Biofeedback, Integrative Pathways, Navigating Chronic Illness with a Mind-Body-Spirit Approach, and Pathways to Illness, Pathways to Health. Dr. Moss proposes that peace is a rightful task of education, but peace education must transform the whole person, which is body, mind, and spirit. In this webinar, Dr. Moss will explore the neurophysiological approach of researcher Stephen Porges and the evolutionary and developmental approach of Paul Gilbert. Porges proposes that the vagal system is an evolutionary structure that enables compassion, social affiliation, and engagement with others. Gilbert understands compassion as an evolutionary development that emerged with a prolonged caregiving for the vulnerable mammalian infant. The emergence of caring demands a number of other conditions, including safety, safeness, and trust. Gilbert and Porges agree that traumatic experiences disrupt the physiological capacity and hinder the development of compassion. Okay, now is the time for our presentation. After the presentation of Dr. Moss, we will have time for Q&A and a couple of minutes of our closing by our group chair, Dr. Gulzar. You may enter your questions in the comment section, and I will ask if you may all mute your videos at this time and help me welcome Dr. Donald Moss. The stage is yours, Dr. Moss.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Dr. Tafrishi. It is my pleasure to address APA Division 52. This is my first opportunity to interact with Division 52, and I was delighted to have this opportunity, so thank you. This is the path that I will follow in my presentation. I will talk briefly about this idea of transforming the individual to achieve peace. I will touch on some philosophical approaches to peace, especially the idea that peace is the responsibility of education. I will propose that education for peace cannot be theoretical or abstract or certainly dogmatic. It must undertake the transformation of the human being. And then I will spend most of my time on current evolutionary and neurophysiological models of development, especially emphasizing how has compassion and social affiliation emerged for our species as a mammal, but especially the human species. And of course, I will highlight the limits of any individual approach in a world of brutality and violence. A little bit about my own background. As an undergraduate, I earned a bachelor's degree at Georgetown University in Foreign Service, International Relations. At that time, I thought that I might assist better interactions among countries, among peoples, through diplomacy. But in the course of my education, I came to become a psychologist and to focus more on individual development. And of course, there are many leaders in the world, spiritual leaders, political leaders, who emphasize that peace begins with transforming the human person. If we look to Buddhist traditions, the Buddha is said to have is quoted as saying, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without." Eckhart Tolle, a current spiritual leader, has stated that you find peace not by rearranging the circumstances of your life, but by realizing who you are at the deepest level, transforming oneself. The Dalai Lama, certainly recognized as a spiritual leader in our times, stated that world peace must develop from inner peace. Peace is not just mere absence of violence. Peace is, I think, the manifestation of human compassion. Thich Nhat Hanh, the late Thich Nhat Hanh, was a spiritual leader for Buddhism, recognized in the United States as a leader in the mindfulness movement. But he was also an activist. He was an organizer during the Vietnam War, responsible for organizing Buddhist organizations opposed to the combat, opposed to the war. And we associate that movement with those Buddhist monks who actually set fire to their own bodies in protest against the war. So he was not simply a monk living in isolation. He was an activist, and yet he believed that peace is present right here and now in ourselves and in everything we do and see. Every breath we take, every step we take, can be filled with peace, joy, and serenity. The question is whether or not we are in touch with it. We need only to be awake, alive in the present moment. So again, the transformation for peace must come within. American philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson, associated with the Transcendental movement, wrote that peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding. If we have no peace, it is because we have forgotten that we belong to each other. So again, there is that calling for more empathy, more understanding, and compassion for one's fellow human beings. Our 20th century spiritual leader, Martin Luther King, stated that darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. We might say that peace is not achieved at the barrel of a gun. And finally, I will quote Jane Goodall, who is interested not only in peace among humans, but also peace with animal species. She spent her life studying primates, and also she was an advocate for respect for our environment. She wrote that we need to connect our brains with our hearts, and appropriately use our science and innovative technologies, as well as indigenous knowledge, to make wiser decisions about people, animals, and our shared environment. Now, my theme today is that Jane Goodall's message is not metaphoric. We must and we can better connect our brains and our hearts. That is the primary message of this lecture, and I will spend time on scholars who have studied the development of the capacity for compassion, and they all emphasize this connection between heart and brain. Now, I also believe that peace is the rightful task of education, and I believe that we are often and largely falling short. Maria Montessori, a late 19th century and 20th century leader in education, wrote that everyone talks about peace, but no one educates for peace. People educate for competition, and this is the beginning of any war. When we educate to cooperate and be in solidarity with one another, that day we will be educating for peace. Now, this sounds almost like a platitude, but it's actually it's a revolutionary point of view. And at least in the United States, it has become a political controversy where a number of conservative individuals do not want any sort of education for empathy, education for compassion in the public schools. Nelson Mandela, leader in civil rights, leader in human rights, stated that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And again, we call on education to transform the human person. There are many academic efforts within the field of peace education, and I will touch only on one individual, James Page. He wrote some things which I found thoughtful for this talk today. Page wrote that one of the adages of philosophy is that there is always more work to be undertaken, and that is very clearly true in our times. The task is before us, and we are only beginning. The challenge of encouraging individuals and groups to interact harmoniously and creatively with themselves and their environment is such a profound and multifaceted challenge, still yet to be completed. And then he identified a number of areas for further investigation, and I will touch on only a few. The interaction between religious education and peace education. And this in itself is very tricky because there has been so much strife in our world, so much brutality undertaken in the name of religions. And yet each of the major religions has in its scriptures and its traditions approaches to peace, approaches to love for one's fellow human person. So I think the interaction between spiritual traditions and peace education is a very important one. Resurrecting those peace-oriented and compassion-oriented elements in religious tradition. And then there's that challenge, that trade-off between peace education and indoctrination. Too often, education simply involves indoctrinating children and not educating them, not awakening their hearts. And then we need to emphasize non-Western sources for peace education. Jane Goodall mentioned indigenous wisdoms, non-Western and indigenous sources for wisdom about compassion for one's fellow person. And then imagination and peace education. Can we imagine a different world? I think of John Lennon's song, Imagine. And finally, peace education and justice education. Sometimes violence happens in the name of liberation because a community or a people is oppressed. And how can we relieve oppression without stirring more combat, more warfare in our communities and among our nations? So now I'm going to turn to developmental neurophysiology, understanding of the emergence of the human capacity for compassion and for affiliation. Paul Gilbert is a leader, a pioneer in the development of compassion-focused psychotherapy, a very prolific author. He undertakes a developmental approach in his understanding of what compassion-focused therapy can undertake. He emphasizes that benevolent caring relationships, that human capacity for caring, emerged in the course of evolution along with the emergence of the caretaking maternal role in mammals and the long-term vulnerability of the primate infant, especially of the human infant. The human infant is not born capable of taking care of itself, seeking its own needs. It calls for the caretaking. And at the same time, when we study developmental physiology, we find that as that caretaking role emerged, there were fundamental changes in the nervous system, which made possible and supported compassion, enabling a caring capacity for human beings and for other primates. According to Gilbert, the evolution and developmental emergence of caring demands a number of conditions, including safety, safeness, and trust. Now, he distinguishes between safety, which is more external, protections from threat, and internal safeness, which is an acquired subjective feeling critical to compassion, and trust within a community of supportive surrounding persons, trust within individual parental relationship and the infant. Cultural support for caring and access to basic resources also facilitate the emergence of caring. A single infant-parent relationship which is surrounded by threats, scarcity of resources, scarcity of food, and unsafe external conditions, is very fragile. Under conditions of threat, harm, adversity, and unmet needs, unmet social and physical needs, it is difficult for those caring relationships to emerge. Today, global hostilities are aggravated by the widespread conditions of combat, crime, and threat. And in these conditions, trust and openness cannot thrive. So we can study what is necessary physiologically for caring and compassion to emerge, but we also need to continue paying attention to those social conditions. Paul Gilbert's work is an extension of the work of John Bowlby, who spent so many decades studying attachment, bonding, and the capacity for caring. Bowlby studied the mother-child bond and proposed that it is the basis for all future psychological connectedness among human beings. Attachment emerged as an adaptive function, keeping the infant close to the mother who keeps the child objectively safe from threat. This is just, the slide shows just one of Bowlby's books, A Secure Base. And we're really talking here about a secure base. The same attachment and bonding creates the internal sense of safeness and trust that enable compassion. Now, returning to Paul Gilbert, Gilbert has written extensively about the physiological foundations for caring. Gilbert reported that compassion training increased compassion, but also increases vagal nerve activation and vagal tone. Gilbert came to see the vagal nerve and the parasympathetic nervous system as critical in the evolution of caregiving and compassion. And I'll spend just a couple of minutes here. Since we have a mixed audience, I'll talk a little bit about what is this vagus nerve, what is this parasympathetic system. The vagus nerve is a cranial nerve, a long, winding and wandering cranial nerve. The word vagus actually has to do with the wandering. We think of a vagrant who wanders. The vagus nerve regulates many organs throughout the body. It forms a two-way highway between the gut and the brain and the heart and the brain, with many more connections. The vagus carries parasympathetic input to the body, providing 75% of the fibers for our parasympathetic nervous system. Now, the parasympathetic nervous system is opposed to the sympathetic. The sympathetic system is the fight or flight system, the activation system for going into combat against a threat. The parasympathetic is a kind of rest system, a soothing system, which puts a brake on that sympathetic activation. One of the best practical measures of the vagus nerve and its activity is what we call heart rate variability, the moment-to-moment variation in heart rate. The little diagram showing a looping sinusoidal curve is a diagram of heart rate and respiration, and we see rather large oscillations in heart rate. When we are comfortable, when we feel safe, when we quiet our body, our mind, our nervous system, we see very large oscillations in heart rate, and that is conducive to social affiliation. Higher vagal nervous system activation is correlated with increased empathy, kindness, and thoughtfulness. There are many practical pathways to increasing activity in the vagal nervous system. My own career, I've been very involved with what's called heart rate variability biofeedback training, where we actually train the person to breathe slowly and cultivate large oscillations in heart rate, with practical implications for many things, increasing pro-social behavior, increasing the capacity for compassion, but also providing recovery from many stress-related medical and emotional disorders. However, there are other pathways to increase vagal activity. Dietary modification is important. Physical exercise can also increase vagal activation. So there are many pathways that help us connect our brains and our hearts. Again, remembering Jane Goodall, we must better connect our brains and our hearts. So another pioneer in this area of the vagal nervous system and compassion is Stephen Porges. Porges proposed a theory called the polyvagal theory, and this is a pocket guide that he wrote because many of his writings are quite difficult to follow. So he wrote a pocket guide to his approach, and the subtitle is The Transformative Power of Feeling Safe. Now, on a practical basis, it's important to know that Stephen Porges, his approach has been applied very practically, for example, to work with people who are on the Asperger's or autistic spectrum, people who are lacking in that capacity for compassion and empathy with their fellow human. And Porges found that his approach was helpful in cultivating more social engagement in those populations. So what can I tell you about Porges' polyvagal theory? Again, like Gilbert, he proposes that the vagal nervous system provides the physiological foundation, facilitating social engagement and compassion. Now, there are two strands within the vagal system, and one of those strands was more recently developed in our evolution, and it's called the ventral or the myelinated vagal system, meaning that there's a myelin sheath around the nerves in that part of the vagal system. This is the most recent circuit to appear in mammals, and it's part of a signaling and communication control system which is unique to mammals. Under conditions of safety, this part of the vagus nerve serves as a brake on the threat response, the stress response. It facilitates better emotion regulation and pro-social behavior which is oriented to other persons. The polyvagal theory asserts that creating calm states and conditions of safety and trust increases the activity of the vagal nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, and it enables the human social engagement system. So for human beings, social engagement is an evolutionary capacity with supporting central nervous system, autonomic nervous system, and endocrine functions. Social engagement serves to regulate distress and negative emotion. When I can reach out and touch someone when I'm under a state of threat, It enables me to regulate my nervous system, regulate my emotions. However, too much distress and traumatic experience can also disrupt those compassionate engagements. So on the one hand, safety, connectedness enable vagal activation. On the other hand, it's a two-way street. Vagal activation also creates the conditions for safety and for connectedness. Cardiac vagal tone, it represents a biomarker of the degree to which people feel a sense of safety and connectedness. It enables us to act with the intention of reaching out and touching someone. It enables social approach behavior and caregiving. Porges talks about how two nervous systems co-regulate. When we engage with another human person, our nervous systems interact and co-regulate one another. This is an embodied relationship between two nervous systems, signaling each other with an agenda to mitigate threat within psychological, behavioral, and neurophysiological domains. And Porges emphasizes this isn't new. This is what we see every day between mother and child or parent and child. The parent-child bond is the original paradigm for co-regulation. What we observe in effective parent-infant bonding is eye contact, skin-to-skin touch, and a lyrical prosody in the words, a kind of a musicalness of the sounds that a parent makes to the baby. Baby talk, singing, soft, soothing vocalizations. We look for the same elements in adult-to-adult compassionate bonding: eye contact, touch, and some kind of soothing vocalization. Screen time, lack of face-to-face contact, and seething hostilities all hinder this emergence of compassion. And I call to your attention that lower picture of two so-called lovers, each of them glued to their own screen and not making eye contact with one another. So adverse or traumatic experiences divert us from caring, compassion, and growth and into fight, flight, and shutdown. This profoundly disrupts the development of the compassionate experience of self and other. And we can ask, how many communities today in North America and around the world, we might think of Gaza, we might think of the Ukraine, how many communities lack the basic safety, supports, and sustenance necessary for the emergence of compassion? And by the way, I don't mean to sound partisan. I feel for the Israeli and the Palestinian communities at this troubled time. Healing from trauma, healing from adversity requires the establishment of a sense of safety in educational and therapeutic settings to enable transformation, emotional healing, and a restoration of safety, trust, and a caring orientation. Porges emphasized that therapists and teachers have to be tuned in to the subject's emotional state, with attunement to facial gestures, vocal intonation, gestures, and to their own bodily response to the client. And in this age of telehealth and teleeducation, how can we remain attuned adequately to facial gestures, vocal intonation, and to our own bodily response to that person at a distance, whether it's our student or our client? And this is not only the nervous system, it's also the hormone system. Kirsten Uvnes-Moberg identified what she called the oxytocin factor. She labeled oxytocin as the hormone of calm, love, and healing. Oxytocin is a peptide hormone involved in bonding, sex, childbirth, and breastfeeding, as well as in relaxation and feelings of calm. Oxytocin is produced in the hypothalamus. It's released by the pituitary, but it interacts with the systems I've been talking about. Oxytocin production and oxytocin release are increased during childbirth, facilitating that parent-child bonding. They are increased during breastfeeding, during sexual intercourse, toward times of close affiliation and connection. Higher oxytocin levels are conducive to pair bonding and a sense of closeness and connectedness. We know that, for example, skin contact and eye contact are correlated with higher oxytocin availability in our bodies. Higher oxytocin levels also reverse many of the effects of the stress response. Sherry Taylor proposed the idea of the tend and befriend response to stress and emphasized that it's correlated with oxytocin. Tend and befriend serves at a higher level socially than fight or flight and is more adaptive to our conditions today in the 21st century. Much of the stress that affects our everyday lives, for those of us who live in urban settings, we can't really deal by fighting, and in many cases we can't flee. But if we can tend and befriend, establishing connections with others, we respond more effectively to stress. Under stress, we can respond by tending to young or vulnerable persons and seeking connections which are supportive for ourselves. And there are connections, very close connections, between the vagal nervous system, heart rate variability, and oxytocin. Kemp and others demonstrated that increased oxytocin produced an increase in heart rate variability. And this is a two-way connection between oxytocin levels and the vagal nervous system. The vagus nerve is very dense on its surface with oxytocin receptors and is easily impacted by increases in oxytocin. In turn, increased vagal activity increases oxytocin distribution. What several authors referred to as stimulation of vagal nerves immediately elevated oxytocin levels in the peripheral bloodstream. So we have a two-way pathway between the love hormone and that part of the nervous system which is connected with social affiliation. I've referred several times to heart rate variability, and there is a close connection between heart rate variability, healing, and compassion. Heart rate variability is the moment-to-moment changes in heart rate, and it's one index of the overall health and resilience of the human organism. Heart rate variability is low when illness, aging, or sedentary lifestyle undermines health. It's higher in young, aerobically active, and healthy subjects. Heart rate variability and vagal tone or vagal activity are strongly correlated, reflecting positive autonomic nervous system regulation. Individuals with higher heart rate variability show higher levels of compassion and attunement to others. This is a reciprocal relationship. More compassion builds higher heart rate variability. Higher heart rate variability enables more compassion. Paul Gilbert has reported studies showing that direct training of compassion increased both compassion and heart rate variability. On the other hand, we have studies showing that direct training of heart rate variability increases measures of compassion and self-compassion. Many breathing exercises, breathing gently, slowly, evenly from the diaphragm, elevate heart rate variability and increase compassion and self-compassion. One of my doctoral students did a doctoral dissertation training 3 different types of breathing exercises, and all 3 groups that undertook breathing training showed elevations on their compassion scales and self-compassion scales after that training. She did no direct compassion training. She changed her research participants' breathing, and it increased their compassion, their capacity for compassion. Now, there are many pathways to this new destination of enabling better capacity for compassion. One of them is the Buddhist tradition of metta. Metta is a Pali word meaning loving kindness, benevolence, or amity. Metta is a strain within Theravada Buddhism based on a particular sacred scripture called the Karaniya Metta Sutta or Sutra. Metta meditation and the Metta Sutta emphasize the cultivation of a loving, compassionate relationship with all living beings. And when we practice metta meditation, it happens in stages. Metta meditation is widely practiced as a form of mindfulness, but with a special emphasis on developing compassion. When we do metta meditation, we are first guided to practice loving kindness toward oneself, since we will have difficulty loving others if we cannot first love ourselves. Next, we practice metta toward a friend, a neighbor, someone in our life that we cherish. And finally, metta calls for compassion for those who challenge us, for those for whom we experience anger or distaste. Bornemann and colleagues conducted a research study with 298 participants in a 9-month training, engaging in a contemplative mental training, elements of mindfulness meditation, and loving kindness meditation. The results were increases in heart rate variability, slower breathing, increased amplitude of breathing. After the first 3 months, these changes were less dependent on deliberate breath training. He concluded, or they concluded, I should say, that the ability to self-induce states of higher vagal activity serves as a resource that allows individuals to more successfully reach out to other people in need, as suggested by previous studies. Contemplative mental training may help build a healthier and more caring society. Again, many paths to the same destination. Hypnosis is another path. Solomon Diamond and colleagues conducted a study back in 2008, and they showed a strong correlation between how deep in trance a person went and how high the amplitude was in their heart rate variability. The deeper the hypnotic state, the more heart rate variability the person displayed. Another study later induced hypnosis in 25 adults and found increases in several measures of heart rate variability. Those changes were evident in both males and females, but they were statistically significant in the females, so there may be a stronger effect there with females. Julia Wendt and Julian Thayer, in an upcoming chapter, proposed that heart rate variability serves as an index of prefrontal cortex functionality. Now, that's the executive control center of our brain. That executive control center operates better when vagal input is strong and heart rate variability is high. The same authors propose that when a person has lower heart rate variability, that's what they called a trance diagnostic marker of psychopathology. So in other words, across diagnoses, whether it's anxiety, depression, PTSD, lower heart rate variability is a sign that psychological problems are present. Two other authors, Theodore Beauchesne and Julian Thayer, reported that low heart rate variability is a general vulnerability factor. Low heart rate variability indicates vulnerability for a number of medical and psychiatric conditions. So, one of the fundamental challenges of human development is to actualize this capacity for caring and compassion. Adverse childhood experiences disrupt the development of the deep sense of safety that is a precondition for compassion. Peace education must provide more than a theoretical or cognitive change. Rather, it requires corrective emotional experiences, restoring the capacity for trust, safety, and compassion. There are many pathways possible for these changes. Many mind-body pathways appear to increase heart rate variability amplify the effects of the vagal nervous system, and improve the capacity for compassion. At least initial research findings suggest that direct compassion training, meditation, mindfulness training, loving kindness training, hypnosis, breath training, and direct heart rate variability biofeedback all produce enhanced vagal nervous system activation, parasympathetic activation, enabling compassion and pro-social behavior. Peace is not easy. Peace has eluded the best human efforts for generations. After all of the modern sages, leaders, philosophical leaders, spiritual leaders have spoken, we still live in a world of great strife. And we do know that peace education and the transformation of individual human beings will not alone erase the brutality and the violence of the world. However, as so many of these sages have suggested, awakening compassion, awakening a capacity for caring is a beginning. To quote Martin Luther King again, hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Thank you. Whoops. Thank you for your attention today. And before I move ahead, I'm going to do something which I meant to do earlier. I'm going to open the chat. And I have a copy of this. Okay, I've placed a copy of my slides into the chat. Can someone verify that you can see it in the chat?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
That should give you the slides that I used in my PowerPoint. Miriam suggested that she wasn't going to give a very elaborate introduction, said I should put up a slide with my contact information and some of my writings. Well, she gave me a very elaborate introduction, so this is probably unnecessary, but I will emphasize that book over there on the far right bottom, Integrating Psychotherapy and Psychophysiology. There are extensive chapters in that book on the vagal nervous system, the emergence of compassion and caring in the human being. So I recommend that book. It's not available yet. It's coming out from Oxford University Press. I'm an editor in that book, and I have several chapters, but we also have a number of chapters by really gifted authors. It's coming out sometime in 2024 from Oxford University Press. So that's a kind of a backup to today's presentation. All of those slides, including this slide showing the books I've written, are available in that PDF of today's presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing, and we do have time for some discussion if there are questions in the chat or in the Q&A.
Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation, Dr. Moss. And I'm glad actually you shared your books. You know, I was thinking about should I read it or not, but I wanted everybody to kind of know what is your work about. Now this will give a chance if they want to go back, see that slide and buy any of the books they would like. So we have a few questions. Let me see. Oh, somebody is saying the chat is disabled and we are unable to see what was shared. Let me see the Q&A. Yeah, that's all I'm seeing here. But we're, you know
what?
Yes.
Somebody just posted it to everyone. Apparently, I posted it to the hosts.
Oh, okay.
So I wonder if attendees can now see it in their chat. If their chat is disabled, they won't be able to.
If there are or any questions anybody has? Okay, so they say it's enabled. Thank you so much. I'm gonna actually ask a question. I haven't, till people have time to write any questions they have, so I can see and ask you. Actually, two questions related. One is, I know the Saybrook University at the Mind Body Medicine department, they have a weekly meditation. And also about heart rate variability. I know, you created the course of psychophysiology and the human stress response, and there are practices for, exercising the heart rate variability, the breathing exercise. Are there links or apps that you recommend, whether for meditation or doing the breathing exercises, in case anybody wants to do that?
Yes, as a matter of fact, you mentioned something to me in an email, and I forgot to put it on that slide. I do recommend, if you're in a web browser, put in Saybrook University self-care channel, and a YouTube channel will come up, and there are literally hundreds of videos there, including guides to various kinds of meditation, as well as lectures on related topics. So there are relaxation exercises, guided imagery exercises, loving kindness meditation exercises, Zen meditation exercises, just quite a variety of activities with good guidance. Most of the videos are 10 to 15 minutes. But there are longer, for example, there are some longer lectures and there's some longer yoga sessions. So there are quite a variety of self-care practices which are supported by that website. I'm sorry that I didn't put it on a slide.
And can people join every week? Because I do understand sometimes,
well,
I have asked, they like to do it with a group at the same time.
Okay, if you want to join live, there is a mindful moments practice every Monday at noon Eastern time during our active semesters. So in between semesters, there's no meditation, but most Mondays there's an active meditation. Now I'm going to go to a website and see if I can quickly find a link for one of those mindful meditations on Mondays. Okay, the active live meditations. I don't seem to have the ability to put this out to everybody. Somebody else will have to copy this and put it to everyone.
Did you put it on the chat?
Well, I'm about to put it on the chat, but I want to make sure it's the right one. No, it doesn't look right.
Yeah, I see. It seems, I don't know if Dr. Tato, you're there, because what I see is we can only post to hosts and panelists. So maybe the function has to be activated by them. If you can please activate that section, because even I can't post anything, so I don't.
Okay. So maybe it's because I was able to post everything. Let me see.
Yeah, it seems that only us four can post to each other, not the rest of the people.
I just put it in the host and panels chat, but if someone can repost it,
I will copy and paste. Don't worry.
Okay, thank you so much. So while we're doing that, again, and waiting for people's question, I want to mention one more thing, and then I will give the time to Dr. Gulzar if we don't have any questions. So again, I'm an international psychologist and empowerment researcher, and the research is with the connection of empowerment of people with mental, physical health and satisfaction in life. So this is my question, Dr. Moss, from you. I believe actually the presentation you have as an empowerment researcher and consultant, my hope is at times we, since we can't control others, whether at a political level, global level, national level, community level, even family, some people have, there's a lot of chaos within their family, and whether people who are younger age because of their age or just different reasons, they don't have the status, they're very vulnerable to create change. So my question is, again, we saw that you mentioned in order to create change in the world is create change within. But sometimes at the same time, if there's not safety and safeness, it's difficult to do that. So level of stress goes very high, whether it's because of family reasons, chaos and family, community, again, national, international, global level. What is your recommendation for people? My hope is, as an empowerment researcher, for people to take, everything that you presented, to have at least moments of peace and breathing, a place to start to, during the 24-hour, become centered and grounded, because that's the only thing they have that nobody can take away. What is your suggestion for that? And is it possible? And is it possible to improve that for the sense of safeness within, well-being within, in a way that hopefully it might radiate outside?
Well, I think that for each of us as individual persons, adopting some kind of self-care practice, whether it's a meditation practice, a yoga practice, learning heart rate variability, exercises, breath training, all of those things as self-care practices can help us as persons. I also think that even though a community is in strife or under tremendous stress, it is possible to intervene. I had experiences in Honduras after Hurricane Mitch. I worked with a church in Honduras, which was reaching out to Choluteca, to the troubled communities where people were largely displaced. And there was a lot of challenges for those communities. The international community came in and built housing, cement block housing to replace many houses that were destroyed by the hurricane. But those new houses were miles away from anywhere there could be work. So the parents were having to leave the children in these houses with no supervision all day long while they went to earn money to survive. So we interacted with the families and with individuals in those communities, and basically we trained volunteers to do mind-body training. And I know that in some cases, people may have been happy and may have felt better for a day or two, but I also was contacted by some individuals years later talking about the fact that they were continuing to use some of these self-care practices in their lives long after the hurricane and long after the conditions in Choluteca and elsewhere were improved. And it was making a difference for those individuals. So I think every time that we can reach out to a troubled community with some kind of training, it's worthwhile. One of my Mexican colleagues, Benjamin Trejo Dominguez, went to Honduras with me to assist in the training. But earlier, he had interacted with people in large stadiums where people were being housed after Hurricane Pauline in Mexico. And he did the same kind of thing, basic breath training, relaxation skills training, and training people to self-disclose their troubles. He used Guatemalan worry dolls because many of these people were separated from their loved ones or had lost their loved ones. So he taught them at least to disclose to these little worry dolls. And he measured significant impact in those populations. So I think we can do that. I know that in the United States, many churches provide meditation training, even though it's not in their tradition. They provide meditation training, which then has an impact in the community because people share it with one another.
Thank you so much. And thank you for everything you're doing. And just one note, Dr. Gulzar, I just wanted to mention, our hope is with these webinars, it's not just about learning, as you mentioned, but putting it into practice and supporting the empowerment of the public. Hopefully they will listen to, either they're here or later will listen to the recording. Okay, thank you so much. Yes, Dr. Gulzar, please.
Sorry, just a small observation with a question mark as well. While Dr. Moss has given a very comprehensive and holistic approach towards compassion, well-being, and caring for others and community welfare, of course. And the two approaches that have been explained are much related to the evolutionary stages or the developmental stages by both authors of you can say Porges and Gilbert. Okay, it seems very nice that these are the developmental approaches. But how long, the point again comes in my mind is that, we are still short of peace and comfort and trust, and we still have unmet needs and that are hindering our development for caring of others. And people around the globe are almost being frustrated of so many things, of poverty and peace, and the violence going on around within the families, without families, even at the national and global level. Nowadays, you mentioned Gaza and Ukraine and some other hostilities around the world. But this all approaches sound very nice, that if we apply it at individual levels, the meditation or the breathing exercises, etc. But again, the big problem, the global level problem is unrest. Everybody is disturbed, by the Gaza, by Ukraine. Every person feels frustrated, So what we can suggest to these political leaders who are creating total unrest around the world, and can they be brought in your lab for exercises, or can you catch them? And can we rectify something, or can we see in near future that there will be peace and well-being in the world around? And I need to know who are the responsible for these people. Are they psychopaths who are creating mass killings without any compassion, and whether they have conscience in their minds or not? I don't know. These are the question mind of the common man nowadays.
Yes.
What's going on? So we also think that, okay, we psychologists think at individual level, but we need to think at this time at the community or the global level as well. So what do you suggest for these the guys who are creating disturbance and chaos around the world, please?
Sadly, I think you're pointing, Dr. Ahmad, to a major challenge with the individual approach, that the persons who may be creating the havoc, some of them may be sociopaths or completely narcissistic people with their own ends in mind, are not going to come into our training laboratories, are not going to study meditation. On the other hand, when I think of Mahatma Gandhi, when I think of Nelson Mandela, when I think of Martin Luther King, it may take decades, but each of them believed to some extent in ahimsa, nonviolent change, nonviolent pursuit of change. And India did become a democracy free of colonial domination. It's not a perfect country. The strife now between the Hindus and the Muslims is terrible. But there are changes brought about by charismatic leaders who call on our hearts. So I think we need more of those leaders who will call on our hearts in a positive way. But I also think it is worthwhile still to do this work with one person or one community at a time. And I'll give you one more example. My colleague who worked with me at Saybrook for several years, James Gordon, heads the Center for Mind-Body Medicine in Washington, D.C. And he started out creating mind-body skills groups for medical students in the United States. But when the disturbances happened in Kosovo, he was invited to come to Kosovo, and he started training volunteers in Kosovo to become group leaders to teach mind-body skills. And the model is train the trainer, and then let those trainers train other trainers and spread the effects within the community. And since that time, he's done this in so many areas of strife in the world, including the Ukraine, including Gaza and Israel both, including in the United States after Hurricane Katrina, in Haiti after one of the major earthquakes. He's trained the trainer. And I know in Gaza right now, I'm afraid I don't know what's happened to Jim's trainers there. But at one time, one of our Saybrook students, Jamila Tai, was running over 30 different psychologists doing this same mind-body skills work with traumatized people in Gaza. So there you can do this kind of train the trainer and use the same kind of mind-body skills and self-care practices that I've been talking about today, and it can have a larger impact. Obviously, it didn't stop the current war.
Dr. Moss, the Saybrook University, the mind-body medicine department has a section for train the trainer. Let's say, if anybody wants to come, because we have professionals also in this group or other people, if they want to take advantage of, the leadership of Saybrook to get trained to do this, because it's not enough just to, do this work at an educational level. I believe professionals need to go out, and as you mentioned.
Well, every student in our mind-body medicine department and in our integrative social work department participates in an extended seminar of mind-body skills in their first year of graduate studies. And now Dr. Celine Kuman-Vega is working on a class to follow up with that, to do further training for mind-body skills trainers.
Is that training available online as well?
No, that is not. That's only available for registered students. It's part of their degree program. It's very labor intensive. On the other hand, Dr. James Gordon in the Center for Mind-Body Medicine does train the trainers, and he does offer the trainings around the country. I'm on an adjunct faculty in Houston for the Institute for Health, Spirituality and Health. And ISH sponsored James Gordon to come into Houston and train the trainers, and created a large body of trainers who now are doing additional trainers in troubled areas within Houston. So that is an ongoing source of training.
That's great. But again,
Thank you so much.
Remains that who will educate those big political leaders who are creating mass destruction all around the world? This is big challenge for all of us.
Yes. Well, and the availability of weapons, it's just escalated. 30 years ago, it was a Kalashnikov rifle, automatic rifle, and now it's armed drones and missiles. And every angry group is able to get access to those weapons, which certainly compounds and escalates the strife and the impact on innocent people who are sitting in their community in their own homes and are suddenly damaged by an explosion that came from nowhere. So yes, I agree. It's a tragedy of our times. Warfare is a human tragedy of all times, but the escalated amount of harm with modern weapons is a modern tragedy.
Thank you so much. And I see here that I think in the chat, Dr. Tato has posted the Saybrook University self-care channel.
Good.
So that is wonderful. I don't see any question. Oh, yes, please.
I was just going to say the Saybrook University self-care channel has a number of recorded meditation trainings. So please take a look at that.
Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I don't see any more questions. Dr. Gulzar, do you have any questions for yourself?
Oh, not a question. I think Dr. Moss has already given all answers to our questions that had been in our minds and that we have narrated. And at the same time, I feel that this is very, very important area that Dr. Moss has put forth before us. And he presented it in a holistic way, brain development, physiological, psychological, social development, and all this relates to not only psychology but also uh, political psychology as well, I think. So we need to address all these issues at our not only at home but at community, and we also should raise our voice. So when we do suggest the people that they should be more educated, they should do research in this area, they invest a lot of time, money, and energy for just putting their knowledge for improvement of little bit improvement in the world around. And what these political leaders are doing with us, they destroy everything within minutes, and weapons and mass destruction like that. So this is really tragic and amazing for all of us. I think we should also raise our voices about this issue as well, that where the millions and billions of people's efforts are gone into the dustbin when these people destroy everything within minutes or seconds like that. So this is a big tragedy that I think, I don't know till what time we'll have to suffer, and we are all in search of peace and well-being, but we should not be disappointed at the same time. Anyhow, we should go on struggling, striving, educate our youngsters and our communities, our maximum what we can do, we should do. We are striving
Yes.
for that, and this is our social responsibility to do something better for all. At least this is our responsibility, and we should abide by it.
Yeah.
So anyhow,
Definitely.
they should also think about like Bush and Blair. So many people around. Well, you have talked about some peace leaders. You should also know some other side leaders as well, what they have been doing and what they have done around the world. So anyhow, we should be determined, and we should try to educate
Yeah.
for peace and healthy human development. And I feel highly obliged to Dr. Donald Moss for giving a very good presentation, and that has invoked so many questions and to think about and do research in these areas. And further, I also very thankful to the participants who came to attend this at this time. In Pakistan, it is almost 11 o'clock, 11 p.m.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyhow, things are nice around the world. We should have good hope, and we feel encouraged by listening Dr. Donald Moss. Thank you very much indeed. It's a great pleasure and honor for all of us to be here with us. Thank you.
Well, thank you,
And we
Dr.
will practice
Tafrishi.
them.
Yeah, thank
You're
you, Dr.
welcome.
Tafrishi. Thank you, Dr. Ahmed, and thank you, Division 52.
Thank you so much. And we will be coming back to you, definitely inviting you again, and maybe other professionals at the mind-body medicine, maybe reflective leadership, something that Dr.
That would
Gulzar
be
is asking for.
fascinating. Yes.
Yes.
Good.
Yes. Thank you so much. And to the presenters of February 29, we're going to have a panel presentation that PCUN members are going to be there, and a few other one of us, and we will present on human rights. How can we kind of support it, and why is it still not there, and how to support psychologists. The information and advertisement is actually out on the website. Thank you so much again for your presentation and for all the attendees being here. Thank you again for the committee helping us to advertise and make the Zoom presentation. Have a great day. Bye-bye.